What's up everyone, how are you all? Today we are back with another blazing Naruto story. What if Naruto's jutsu attracted goddesses from other worlds? If you enjoy, then please like, share and do comments. And also check the description to original creator of this beautiful creation. To the standard observer, a person with these characteristics would be seen as someone who is rather ordinary. Well, the people that would think along those lines clearly have never met Naruto Uzumaki. The only thing even close to being ordinary about him was his appearance, and even that was a little out of the ordinary. The three odd whisker-like marks on both of his cheeks threw the ordinary thing even more out the window. Granted, the fact that his entire body was encased in a strange-looking cloak of orange flames didn't really help with the whole looking normal thing. But hey, he was Naruto and Uzumaki. The problem with being Naruto Uzumaki at this current point in time is that if you were in fact him, then you were fucked. Well, not entirely, just really close. Gah! Came a slightly strangled cry from said blonde. Okay, now he was fucked. Yep, there was no getting away from it. It, in this case, meaning Kaguya. Why would he screwed for getting hit by a woman named Kaguya? Because Kaguya wasn't just a woman, she also just so happened to be a goddess. So now the fucked thing gets put into better context, doesn't it? Why was he fighting? Getting his ass kicked, a goddess, one might ask. Well, there was a war, and some crazy people, and some fighting, then a lot of people died, then a different god showed up and killed more people. Then Kaguya came and here we are. For some reason I feel like someone just took a crack at over a year's worth of manga, anime releases. Meh, it's probably not important. Naruto would think about breaking the fourth wall later though, as he had to deal with a dimension-smashing monster of his own. Thankfully, he wasn't alone. Naruto, that jutsu, can you still use it? His teammate and current god fighting partner Sasuke Uchiha jumped down right next to him. Heck yeah, I can. I've practiced this jutsu more than the Rasengan. I know I can pull it off. He gained a confident look on his face as he turned towards his slightly emo teammate. He could see that even Sasuke had a look of determination on his face. If you can make an opening, then I can use it on her for sure. Besides, we need to finish this so we can get back to Sakura-chan and Kakashi-sensei. All he got in reply was a simple nod of confirmation. This was all that was needed, however, as they both got ready for one final attack. When they were both ready, Sasuke led the attack. He used the flames of the Amaterasu that came from his Sharingan and aimed them directly at Kaguya. Ordinarily, the flames of the Amaterasu would burn through anything they touch and be impossible to extinguish. But alas, they were fighting a goddess. So flames did little more than provide a momentary distraction, but it was enough. This little distraction gave Naruto enough time to close the distance between him and Kaguya, and gave him the time needed for the creation of several Kage Bunshin. When the clones were formed, they surrounded Kaguya in a circle. What does he intend to do? Mother absorbs all chakra. Surely they have learned this by now? Black Zetsu mused to himself from inside Kaguya's sleeve. Sasuke just gained a very tired look on his face. He then closed his eyes and pinched the bridge of his nose with his thumb and index finger. Did he know what was coming? Yes, did. Did he like the idea of trying to use it on an actual goddess? Nope, not all. But given the situation, he was willing to try anything. So that's why when he was knocked back by a powerful explosion that sent him flying over 50 meters, he lost all hope. He thought that Naruto had been annihilated. What else could he have thought? Big explosion, really stupid jutsu. All in all, it seemed like the kind of way Naruto would go out. But when he looked back at where the two were just moments before the explosion, he was shocked to see that they were both gone. Moments earlier, it probably would have worked too. Kaguya was still trying to comprehend what in the Sam hell had just happened. He was less than 5 meters from her, everything was set up perfect for him to land the finishing blow. Well, except that, in his haste, Naruto pulled a Naruto. And somehow managed to trip over the only rock in the entire world that Kaguya had created. So Naruto ended up flailing his arms around in panic, trying to grasp onto anything in an attempt to prevent himself from tripping. This also did not end well, as he ended up accidentally grabbing onto Kaguya while trying to steady himself. More specifically, he ended up grabbing onto her ass, but it didn't stop there. Kaguya, who was still partially in a daze from the last attack, reacted by trying to step backwards. This didn't end well for either party, however, as Naruto had yet to fully get his balance back. So when she went backwards he went with her, albeit unintentionally. Due to the unexpected weight, Kaguya lost her balance as well. And then gravity took effect on the two combatants. Kaguya's body followed by her head smacked the ground, causing her to locked in place. Then Naruto's head and body landed right on top of Kaguya's. To be more precise, he fell in such way that his mouth was positioned perfectly over hers. They both didn't move for a second as they tried to figure out what had just happened. Then Naruto felt a massive surge of power build up between them, and then his vision went dark. Cloud watching. To others it might be seen as a rather boring hobby. But something about the clouds just captivated him. Was it the way the clouds stretched and warped themselves into all different shapes and sizes? Did it have something to do with the way they just seemed to float there lazily, only going where the wind takes them? He really didn't know for sure, but he still watched them. He watched them because that was one of the few things that kept him sane, and he understood why Shikamaru did it so often. Naruto-san. He quickly turned his head towards the person addressing him, his shoulder-length spiky blonde hair being shaken about as he did so. As interesting as the outside may be, I would really appreciate it if you would pay attention while in my class. Several students, girls and boys alike, giggled a little at his expense. Naruto just sighed a little, and gave the man who was his history teacher a small apologetic nod while scratching the back of his head in a sheepish manner. He was used to this sort of thing happening, as was everyone else in the room, so the minor disturbance was quickly forgotten. The remaining portion of class passed by rather quickly, and when the bell rang signaling it was time for lunch he was quickly out the door. As he passed through the halls on his way to get his lunch, he couldn't help but smirk a little at what he heard. Look, it's Naruto-senpai. Really? He's so cool. Are those whisker marks real? I don't know, but I really want to find out. He had to suppress a small shudder at that last comment. Fangirls were a truly horrifying thing. He now understood why Sasuke had always been so afraid of them. They were everywhere. In the halls, the classrooms, the gym, the track, the city park, and there was even one time where he found one hiding in his gym locker. Once more he forced to suppress a shudder. That situation had been both awkward and terrifying for all parties involved. He passed right by the cafeteria like it wasn't even there. They didn't serve ramen, so quite frankly he felt that it shouldn't even be there in the first place. He navigated his way through the halls with practiced ease until he came upon his favorite spot. It wasn't much, just a small shaded area with a bench and a vending machine. He came to this spot for one reason and one reason only. This vending machine happened to be the only place in the entire school that served ramen. It was cup ramen, but it was ramen nonetheless. It seemed like today was not his day, however, as the machine had not been restocked the night previously. So as a result, no ramen. This was no big deal, he could totally handle this situation. Why? It's not my fault I splurged a little yesterday and bought out the machine's entire stock. I was hungry. Okay, maybe not so much handling as finding a way to cope with this, to him, devastating information. Will you be quiet? It's hard to sleep with you whining like an incoherent toddler. He was not whining, he just openly expressing his displeasure. Shut up, y'all, lazy furball. I'm trying to cope with real-world problems here. Real-world problems? Don't make me laugh, brat. If the only thing you have to worry about is running out of ramen, then I'd say we're doing pretty good compared to when we first got here. He hated to admit it, but Kurama had a point. Yeah, you aren't exactly wrong. That still didn't change the fact that he was hungry. He needed options and he needed them now. After a few moments of thinking about his current predicament, he got an idea. Oh hey, I know. I'll just ask the boss lady for a pay advancement. Before he could fully congratulate himself on his brilliant idea, he was interrupted by the sounds of amused laughter coming from his soul partner. And just what is so funny, you stupid lump of fur? Honestly, I can't decide. All this did was make Naruto even madder. Oh, pray tell. I can't decide which is funnier. You taking orders from that little pipsqueak, or you thinking that she would give you a pay advancement? He wanted to respond. But Kurama's laughter had gone from a low chuckle to a full-on bellowing laugh. He wouldn't have been able to get a word in edgewise anyway, so he just went ahead with his plan. Fine, I'll show you who's boss, you stupid fox. This'll work, TTEBO. He pulled out his cell phone and after finding the number labeled as "Boss Lady," clicked call. This'll show that bastard who's boss. The phone rang for a few seconds before it was answered. What? Always straight to the point. Yeah, I was wondering if. No, maybe he had misheard. Eh? I said no, you don't even know what I'm going to ask F. You were going to ask for a pay advancement, correct? To which I just responded with no. But, I'm hanging up now, don't bother me again unless it's something important. There was an audible click, signaling that she had done as she said she would. Doesn't she understand that I don't have enough money for the cafeteria? I get the ramen because it's cheap and delicious. Hate to say I told you so. Oh wait, no I don't. Before he could even begin to start yelling at his inner companion, the horrific sound of the school bell sounded, signaling it would soon be time for afternoon classes. So he was forced to march back to class with a defeated look on his face, and a laughing demon that only he could hear. The rest of the day passed much slower than first half did. He contributed this to several factors. The first being his ever-growing hunger, and the second, that was pretty good, brat. You showed me who was boss all right, and it's definitely not you. After having Kurama sealed inside of him for nearly his entire life, he had built up a rather impressive resistance to his taunting. But after hearing it for nearly 3 hours, he was starting to understand why some Jinchuriki went insane. To his relief, the final bell of the day rang, and he promptly removed himself from the premises. After leaving through the school's front gate, he ran for a few minutes trying to get to a secluded spot. When he was sure no one was looking, he pulled out his earpiece from his blazer and activated it. "This is Golden Fox, ready for pickup." The line was silent for a moment, until a very monotonous voice came over the line. "Roger." The feeling of weightlessness soon overcame his senses. After a moment he blinked. When his eyes opened, he was no longer standing in an empty street. He was now inside of his place of employment, the ship known as the Fraxinus. How did he start working in place like this? Well, flashback. 1 year ago. Kaguya's body followed by her head smacked the ground, causing her to be locked in place. Then Naruto's head and body landed right on top of Kaguya's. To be more precise, he fell in such way that his mouth was positioned perfectly over hers. Neither of them moved for a second as they tried to figure out what had just happened. Then Naruto felt a massive surge of power build up between them, and then his vision went dark. When his eyes opened, he was standing in a massive crater at least 100 meters in diameter. He didn't move though, since he did not have the strength. He was vaguely aware of Kurama screaming at him from inside of his mind. He looked around the crater, and found that he was alone. Before he could even begin to think of what happened to Kaguya, his vision darkened once more. He drifted in and out of consciousness several times over the course of the next several days. It seemed that even with Kurama's chakra, he still couldn't quite recover from his bout with the rabbit goddess. After what seemed like an eternity, his eyes snapped open. This time, however, he was recovered enough to stay that way. The first thing he noticed was the massive headache that felt like it wanted to split his skull open. He waited for a moment, hoping it would pass. After what felt like hours, his head stopped hurting enough for him to take in his surroundings. The room he was in, while somewhat familiar, was also completely alien to him at the same time. He had been in the hospital enough times during his life to tell he was in some sort of infirmary. He was currently lying on what he assumed to be some sort of hospital bed, with tubes in his arm leading to some sort of machine. Naruto noticed that there was a suspicious lack of orange on his person, only to silently berate himself a moment later. No duh, they took my clothes, they were probably shredded to hell. His entire mini area was surrounded by a large blue curtain that blocked him from seeing what lied beyond his current position. Welcome back to the world of the living, brat. Kurama? The one and only. He couldn't help but sigh in relief. At least he wasn't alone in this place. How long have I been out? This was an important question, as he needed to know how long whoever had him. No, that is not a typo. Only a few days, nothing to be concerned about. There was some good news. Do you know where we are? Don't got a clue, brat. I will say though, wherever we are, it ain't the elemental nations. Eh? Perhaps he had heard wrong. I'm being serious here. Heck, we probably aren't even in the same dimension anymore. Naruto wanted to protest, but he knew that it was definitely a possibility. After all, Kaguya had been able to create new dimensions at will. So it wasn't that much of an impossibility. What happened? We were fighting her and then His cheeks lit up in a shade of bright red. Wait, did I really? Yep, congratulations, brat. You beat a seemingly all-powerful goddess by being a total degenerate. I bet that master of yours couldn't be any prouder right now. As much as he wanted to tell Kurama to stuff it, He had a bit of a point. In fact, he was pretty sure he read something similar in one of his old teacher's manuscripts. That aside, how was she sealed? Didn't Rikudo Oji-san say that both myself and Sasuke Teme had to seal her together? I've been wondering the same thing, but I know for a fact that you sealed her. I know what it feels like to get sealed, so I can say without a doubt that that's what happened. Before any more thought could be given to the matter, the curtain around him was pulled back. Oh my, it seems like you pulled through after all. Naruto did not know what to expect, but the person before him didn't quite fit the picture. The woman in front of him was without a doubt one of the most beautiful women he had ever seen. She appeared to be in her early 20s, her skin was a little pale, but this was probably just the result of her spending too much time inside. She had long unkempt pale blue hair that was tied into a ponytail that ran down the right side of her head. Like him, she had bright blue eyes that were further highlighted by a pair of glasses that were the same color. On closer inspection, he noticed that she had very deep-set dark circles under her eyes. Must not sleep a lot, huh? You can take a picture if you wish to, I'm sure it would last longer. It took him a moment to realize that he had been staring at her. His face lit up a little bit once again. Sorry, you just weren't quite the person I was expecting. She tilted her head slightly to the right in a cute manner, all the while keeping a perfectly neutral expression on her face. It's fine, I understand that you may be a little confused, Mr. Naruto. Uzumaki Naruto. She pointed at him as she said his name. Yeah, it's my name. Trust me, I know. Would you mind telling me exactly where I am? Because I'm a little confused at the moment. At first all he got was a small nod of confirmation. This was followed by her walking away while gesturing for him to follow. Are you able to stand? If not, then I can come back and get you in a few hours if need be. Nah, I'm good to go. Or so he thought. As he made to stand up, he was quickly met with a small wave of dizziness. Damn, what the hell? He could do nothing but wait for it pass. When it finally did, he was able to stand up, albeit a little shakily. Do you require assistance? I could sedate you and force you back into bed if you need me to. Straight to the point, huh? Well, at least he knew what type of person she was. I'm fine, let's just get this over with. He figured that he might as well try to see what the damage was. As long as there were no crazy organizations bent on world domination or any crazily overpowered individuals, he figured he would probably be okay. Murasama Rain. My name, you gave me yours. So I thought it only proper. Murasama Rain. That was an odd name. Then again, he was named after a ramen toppee. A type of tropical storm. Yes, that's what it was, damn it, so he couldn't really judge. Well, it's nice to meet Murasama-san. He wanted to start off in this place with a good image, so he decided he would do his best to be more proper when talking to others. Just Rain-san is fine. I've never personally cared for formalities. Well, that went out the window rather quickly. She doesn't seem like a bad person though. Still though, I hear ya, brat. We can't be too careful, even I have no idea what to expect. Just keep your guard up. Right, here we are. They had stopped in front of a pair of strange-looking doors that must have led to some sort of command center. Just go in there and all of your questions will be answered. He couldn't help but release a small gulp as he looked at the doors in front of him. For some reason he was feeling really nervous. If only he knew. Flashback end. He released a small sigh. If only he knew how right he was. Did he expect to be on a massive airship? Nope. Did he even know what an airship was? Negative. Did he expect for the commander of said airship to be 4 years younger than him? Nope. Did he expect to be bombarded with questions? Yep. That one was expected. He did sorta crash land into their dimension after all. So after a very long explanation, one in which he may or may not have left out the whole part about the Fourth Shinobi War, and the elemental nations altogether, and the part with the Rikudo Sennin, and the tiny bit of info that was called Kurama. He neglected to mention these things at Kurama's behest, and he could see his friend's point. And in turn he found out that these people worked for an organization known as Ratatoskr, and their job was rather simple. To prevent the powerful beings known as spirits from destroying the world. Simple, yes. Easy, no. However, the more he learned about these spirits, the more he came to realize that they were starting to sound a lot like Kaguya. Female, check. Ridiculously strong, check. Powers that can't be easily explained, check. Unknown origin, check. Sealed by a kiss, yep. Realizing that she couldn't just let him go, for various reasons too obvious to be stated. Katori did the only thing she could, and that was offering him a job. He was caught off guard at first. He had just met these people like 3 hours ago, okay, technically 3 days. Still though, he had had little choice in the matter, so he accepted. And here he was almost a year later. He had long since given up on finding a way home. Both he and Kurama agreed that with both Kaguya gone and Madara dead, there was little to be concerned about. It wasn't as if Sasuke would go power mad, trap all of the tailed beasts and then destroy everything, right? See? Absolutely ridiculous. What was his job, you may ask? What did the great Uzumaki Naruto do for a living? Nay Naruto, good job on keeping them away yesterday. It really made things easier. Who were they, you ask? They were a group of highly trained military professionals known as the Anti-Spirit Team, or AST, for could basically be considered the antithesis of the Ratatoskr. While they wanted to stop the spirits using peaceful means, the AST had other ideas. Outfitted with the best and latest military equipment, their goal was the total elimination of all spirit-related beings. And, more recently, a certain blonde-haired individual. Meh, don't worry about it, Mr. Bad Marriage. Besides, it's pretty fun seeing them get all flustered like that when I pull out the big guns. Let it be known that by big guns, he meant pranking equipment. He would use anything he could think of. Smoke bombs, paint, water balloons, silly string, tar, feathers, spiders, venomous snakes. He liked to be over the top. And just about anything he could get his hands on. He fought them sometimes, yes, well, not really. Although there was the one time they almost cornered him, but thankfully he still had one extra rubber chicken on his person, so was fine in the end. Most of the time he would hit them with some sort of prank, varying in magnitude and seriousness. They would then, naturally, get very pissed off. Then proceed to chase him around while he taunted them about being too slow to catch him. It was a delicate balance, a fun one, but still very delicate. He knew for a fact that if they ever caught him he would be torn to shreds by the power of feminine fury. The problem was, they were getting closer and closer to catching him every time. Couple that with the recent increase in spacequakes that were taking place, well, even he knew that his luck would run out eventually. Suddenly the doors to the bridge opened up, and in walked the very person who he was looking for. He was about to walk up to her and give her a piece of his mind. He quickly noticed, however, that she did not look happy, so he decided he would postpone their conversation. Given the lack of smart-ass commentary from his tenant, he guessed that Kurama agreed with his decision. Karma must have really been feeling like a bitch today, however, because she called out to him anyway. Naruto. Her tone made it clear that this was an order, and not a request. Hi? Naruto did his best to sound like a man. Come on man, she's just a little girl. A scary as hell little girl. Yeah, that really doesn't make me feel any better. His inner conversation was cut off by said scary little girl. What's with you asking for tomorrow off, huh? Everyone else is working, so why can't you? Oh come on Katori-chan, it's just one day. That's right, appealed to her better nature. No, apparently her better nature decided to stay home today. What's wrong with one day? Besides, there hasn't been a spacequake in over almost 2 weeks. It's not like a spirit's gonna show up tomorrow or anything, right? He received a very stern look, and was afraid that she was going to say no. Fine, but if there's even the slightest hint of a spirit showing up tomorrow, you'll find yourself working double overtime every day for the next month. Got it? Even she had to admit that the blonde's work ethic was impressive. A day off wouldn't set them back at all anyway. Yes ma'am. He was feeling totally ecstatic. A day off for the first time in nearly a month. He just hoped his luck would hold out for one more day. He really didn't want that overtime. If that happened, he might start to look more Rain, and not in the good way. Contrary to popular belief, Naruto wasn't a big fan of working hard. True, when it came to things like going on covert missions or training, he worked his tail off. But when it came in the form of having to constantly deal with the powers of female righteousness, he wasn't opposed to slacking off a bit. He was still supposed to be at school, of course, but he hated dealing with minor details like that. You sure this is okay, brat? Even if you do have the day off, I still don't think we should just slack off the whole time. Naruto was currently walking down the street while carrying a few grocery bags under his arms. Peeved asterisk. I don't even want to hear crap like that from you in the first place. All you do is sit inside that cage of yours and complain all day. And when you're not doing that, you sleep. You have like the ultimate lazy person's lifestyle. Hey, I'll have you know that I only sleep for 19 hours a day now. I used to sleep for months, hell maybe even years at a time. As far as I'm concerned, you should be honored that I stay awake as much as I do." Naruto waved his hand dismissively. Hi, Kurama-sama. I feel so overjoyed that you take time out of your obviously busy schedule for a being so insignificant as myself." Something about the sarcastic tone that Naruto used really pissed him off. If it had been anyone else, superpowered seal aside, they probably would have been torn limb from limb. But it was just Naruto, so he would let it slide, for now at least. So he simply returned to his highly important job of taking a nap, all the while grumbling about little blonde pieces of shit. Naruto was broken from his sleep by a sound he knew all too well. The sound that he hoped wouldn't be heard by anyone for at least a few more days. It was the sound of a spacequake alarm. Maybe if I stay inside and pretend I didn't hear it, then nothing will happen. I'm not that lucky, am I? Not even a little bit. Kurama answered him without even the slightest bit of hesitation. Before he could come up with a good excuse for staying inside, he heard another sound. This one coming from his pocket. Shit, it's probably Kotori. You ready for a month straight of overtime? 'Cause I know I am. Shut the hell up. How was I supposed to know that this shit would happen today? Face it, brat. You are screwed. So we might as well head out and have some fun with those hot babes with the exhibitionist issues. I'm not going to dignify that with a response. You're right though, we might as well. It's a good thing I stocked up on caramel topping and orange peels. I'll probably have to give it my all today. Do I even want to know what you plan on doing to them, that stuff? He thought for a moment while putting on his shoes, before answering just as he walked out the door. Nah, not really. Did you come to kill me as well? Her deep lavender eyes bore heavily down into his own deep brown. Shido had hoped he would never have to see a spacequake in person. Hell, he hoped that there wouldn't even be another one ever again. Now not only was he standing less than 50 meters from the epicenter of one, he had also almost died because of it as well. Wait a second. Then there was the other slightly more pressing issue of the pretty girl pointing a massive sword at his face. She was, for loss of a better way of describing her, impossibly beautiful. Her long-reaching dark purple hair helped to accent her deep indigo eyes. She was garbed in a black and pink dress that was covered with a type of purple-plated armor. On top of her hair was a ribbon just a few shades of purple lighter than it. Who are you? She lowered her sword ever so slightly, raising an eyebrow at his question. My name. Shido noticed that her face took on a more solemn look. No, that's not it. Why is she so? A name? I have no such thing. His eyes widened a little at her statement. She said it so matter-of-factly. He realized what that look in her eyes was. It was loneliness. Before he could say anything back to her, another explosion rang out. He closed his eyes and raised his arms above his head in attempt to protect himself from the blast, only to discover that there was no need. He opened his eyes to find that both himself and the girl were shielded from the blast. Why won't you learn that your attacks won't ever work on me? Makes no difference to me. I'm just here to eliminate you. Wait a second, he recognized that voice. There was no doubt about it. Shido didn't know anyone else who spoke with that little emotion. But what was she doing here? Origami? He was forced to cover his hands with his face once again as both of the girls clashed together, creating a massive shockwave that nearly sent him flying. Despite how hard she was trying, it was rather apparent that the girl with no name was the stronger of the two by a rather wide margin. She's so strong, and yet, she still looks so sad. Itsuka, Shido? It seemed that Origami had finally taken notice of him. She became serious again a moment later, however, and faced down the unnamed girl with newfound determination. They charged each other once again, and just before they collided, Shido felt a hand on his shoulder. As the explosion rang out across the street, Shido prepared himself for it, only to never feel a thing. He opened his eyes to discover that he was currently on top of one of the smaller buildings overlooking the area where the spacequake had taken place. Phew, I may be pretty fast, but even I have to admit that was cutting it a little close. Shido turned to discover the person who had prevented him from getting caught up on the explosion. Yu Uzumaki-senpai? This was getting really weird. First he met a really pretty girl who almost killed him, then he ran into Origami who also almost killed him. And last but not least, he was apparently just saved from being turned into something that would have resembled an exploded pumpkin by the most popular guy in his school. Hee, yo. Naruto offered him a small two-handed salute, before sighing once again in relief. Shit, that was really close. I hope Katori doesn't get angry at me for showing up a little late to the party. It's your own damn fault. If you hadn't forgotten that stupid fanny pack of yours, then we could have stopped her from interfering. Hey, sorry for not being perfect. I forget things, okay? And it's not a fanny pack, it's a side satchel. There is a huge difference. Right. Of course there is. Smart ass. Uzumaki-senpai, could tell me what's going on here? Naruto was quickly brought back to earth by the sound of Shido's voice. Right, sorry about that. He put his hand under his chin in thought for a moment. Katori should really be the one to explain this to him. How about this then? Naruto listened for a moment before nodding in approval. He then turned back to Shido while trying to suppress a smile. Sue, how do you like your new girlfriend? Shido's eyes widened, he then pointed to where the crater was. Do you mean that? Naruto nodded with a grin on his face. You should feel very lucky, from what I saw she was quite the looker. At that comment Shido fell over backwards completely unconscious. Well, that went well. I don't think that's exactly how I would word that. So, what do you have to say for yourself? Let the record show that Itsuka Katori was not what you would call a very understanding person. Granted, when she was in her Imouto mode, she was considerably kinder, and far more understanding. However, this was currently not the case. She was in her commander mode, right now. What did that mean? Well, you call that an excuse. Kaya, I'm sorry for showing up late, please don't hurt me. That of course didn't stop her from hitting him with a flying kick straight to the head. I'll let you off easy this time. But if you screw things up that badly again. She didn't need to continue. He clearly got the message. Mom, he's woken up and is on his way here. Good, send him in. Naruto sighed in relief. Someone else she could take her crazy amounts of loli-fueled anger out on. As he approached the door she called out to him in a softer tone. Naruto. He turned his head to meet her gaze. Thanks for keeping Onichan safe. It was barely noticeable, but her cheeks had taken on a slightly reddish tint. He simply nodded and sent a smile her way before stepping out the door. As Naruto walked out the door, Shido was just getting ready to step in. Ah, Uzumaki-senpai, could you? Naruto clapped him lightly on the shoulder. Good luck, Shido. He turned back to look at the command center, before returning back to looking at Shido once more. You're gonna need it. With that he continued on his way through the ship. He had someone to see. After making his way through the twisting confines of the ship's interior, he came to a room very similar to the medical bay. Walking over to the far corner he could hear the steady beep of a machine. The machine, along with a few different IVs, were hooked up to the person that Naruto came to visit. She looked far younger now, somewhere around his age, and her face had a more human-esque look to it without all of the extra facial accessories compared to when he had first seen her. But he could tell that it was still her without a doubt. Her long, flowing, pale white hair, her slightly stern-looking, yet undeniably beautiful facial features. And he was sure for a fact that if her eyes were to open that they would be as pale as the moon itself. Kaguya. It was hard to believe that someone as powerful as Kaguya could be reduced to such a state, and yet here she was. As unconscious as the day that he first seen her like this nearly a year ago. The reason he had not seen her in the spacequake crater after his arrival was all thanks to the friendly folks at Ratatoskr. It seemed that Naruto had been recovered after her, something about the safety of a spirit being far more crucial than his own. The first thing he had wanted to do after finding out she was alive was to go down to her room and finish her off himself. But when he got there and saw her laying there, completely powerless and defenseless, he couldn't bring himself to do it. He didn't know why, but for some reason seeing her like that just made him feel conflicted. Not that there's anything wrong with checking on your girlfriend once in a while, but can we wrap this up soon? How many times do I have to tell you that sort of thing's impossible? Despite the harsh tone that he directed at Kurama, a small blush had crept up into his face. Oh sure. The sarcasm in his voice didn't go unnoticed. Still, at least the first girl you actually kissed was a hot one. Oi, she was not the first girl I ever kissed. I've kissed plenty of other people before. Let's do a checklist then, shall we? The emo kid again. The one chick who just wanted to suck out your soul. Yeah, unless I missed one, that's it. None of those count. Ah shit. Well, I'll just leave you two alone then, shall I? Sometimes he really hated that stupid fox. I did it. Ah, the sounds of accomplishment. If only this poor soul had actually accomplished something. Seriously, this is just sad. How is this guy supposed to make a girl fall for him if it took him that long to beat that game? On easy, nonetheless. You and I beat it in half the time, and that was on hard. I don't know, but I'm sure that Katori has a plan. She's the boss lady for a reason, you know. Since the only known way to seal spirits was to make them fall in love with the person sealing them, Katori had suggested that Shido learn how to make a girl fall for him. Of course, Shido had been on the same amount of dates that Naruto had, meaning 0, so Naruto suggested the next best thing. Dating sims, and a lot of them. That's the one thing about this place that is way better than back home. Naruto nodded sagely at Kurama's words. Yep, even I have to admit that those games are a little addicting. This grew a scoff from his partner that made Naruto raise an eyebrow. What? You, that's what? And what have I done to deserve your criticism of all things? You're a total hypocrite, that's what. I was there when you played that entire stupid visual novel from start to finish in one setting. It wasn't for that long. You played for over 30 hours straight. Face it, without me you would have gone blind a long time ago. It's not my fault that it was such a tragic yet beautiful love story filled with relatable and likable characters. It was stupid, the drama part didn't even make sense. And the first heroine was a total slut. You leave Miyako-chan out of this. We done? Yeah, we should probably stop. Naruto sighed from his seated position on top of the Otsuka household. He looked at his right hand and closed his eyes, concentrating his internal energies. The chakra in his body swirled to life, albeit the protests his body was making. After a minute, some of his chakras swirled to life in the form of blue spiraling ball located in his right hand. He could now do the Rasengan one-handed with ease, or so it seemed. The beads of perspiration and the deep-set frown that formed on his face told a slightly different tale. The Rasengan was one of his most simple techniques, and yet it was nearly all he could manage. Still not much luck, huh brat? Naruto's frown seemed to deepen even further, making him look generally depressed. Nope, I can actually do the technique now. But it leaves me too drained for it to be used in a prolonged fight. It's definitely out of the question when we deal with the female rage demons too. How are things on your end? Suddenly Naruto was no longer sitting on the roof, he was instead standing in what appeared to be a sewer-like area. He took a few steps forward, and was suddenly standing in front of a massive-looking cage. This was the cage that was used to hold Kurama for the first years of his life. And now the doors to the cage were standing wide open. The problem? Kurama still found himself unable to move an inch, and he looked rather unhappy about it. I'll take that as a no. Kurama's entire body sans for his head and a part of his right front leg were encased in solid stone. Yeah, the answer is still definitely no. Well, at least your arm is free now. A year ago the only thing that you could move was your head. Oh, I feel so privileged. Maybe if we wait another year I'll be able to use the whole arm so I can beat your stupid ass with it. Hey, I'm not exactly running at max capacity here either. I think I had more chakra than this when I was 5. You did have more chakra. I was there. Thank you for proving my point. Naruto walked over to Kurama before laying on the floor of his mindscape directly in front of the fox's face. Did you at least give Sage Mode another try? This drew a scowl out of the blonde. Yeah, not that it did any good. This city might look pretty from a human perspective, but there is almost no nature here for me to draw the energy from. I can still use Sage Mode, but the amount of time it takes to gather even a little bit of energy isn't really worth it. TCHH. I hate to say it, Kit, but until Kaguya wakes up we may just be shit out of luck. Let's hope Katori's theory is correct then. 1 year ago. You probably can't use your powers for a reason. Naruto looked at her in confusion. What do you mean? Well, Katori spun around in her chair a few times while she looked to be contemplating something. Think of it this way. You said you had half of the ability needed to seal her away, right? The blonde nodded. He was given Ashura's half of the 6 paths power, while Sasuke was given Indra's. Yeah, old man Hagoromo said that both halves were needed to seal away Kaguya though. Katori popped a sucker into her mouth and spun around a few more times while thinking it over. Well, here's what I imagine transpired. Naruto gestured for her to continue. You already had half of the needed formula to seal her away. The kiss probably acted as a replacement for the other half the formula that you were lacking. She paused to make sure he understood before continuing on. But since you lack the ability to seal away spirits naturally, your body did the next best thing. It probably used all of your inner energy to help bind the spirit away. In addition, since she didn't have a high level of affection for you, it needed a massive amount of power to seal her away. It made sense, well, to Kurama at least. She'd lost Naruto at the substitution part, but he didn't want to let her know that. Do you think there's any way to get it back? The little redhead shrugged. She's probably the only person that can answer that question. Well, even if she can't answer our questions, we still won't know exactly what happened until she wakes up. Even though they both knew that they were more than likely stuck here for good, Naruto couldn't help but hold out the hope that they would find a way back. Hey Kurama? The blonde broke the brief moment of silence between the two. The only sign that the fox gave was the opening of one of his eyes. We won't be going home, will we? Honestly? Please? Kurama noted the desperate tone that his Jinchuriki had used. Naruto had been doing his best to keep the thoughts of home at bay, but Kurama knew that putting off the problem wouldn't help solve it. He had made several attempts at bringing up the matter before, but Naruto didn't want to listen. Whenever it was brought up, the blonde would either change the subject, or ignore him completely. I don't think going home is going to be a part of the equation anymore, kid. Naruto sat up from where he was laying down in his mindscape. Even with his bangs overshadowing his eyes, Kurama could still see a few tears trailing down his face. Tears that, in his mind, were long overdue. TCH, I must really be going soft to have a Jinchuriki as pathetic as this. He thought to himself before turning his attention back to Naruto. But he's not all bad, I guess. Saying that Shido had been having a rather strange week would be like saying that an oven can get warm. This was without a doubt, as far as he was aware anyway, the weirdest week he had ever had in his entire life. First, he discovers that the phenomena known as spacequakes are actually caused by the appearance of strange females labeled as spirits. Then he finds out that there is an entire organization dedicated to the well-being of said spirits. Not only that, but apparently his little sister just so happens to be the commander of said organization. And finally, he learned that one of the most popular guys in his school is also in the employment of the Ratatoskr organization. Yesterday you saw me. Yeah, there was one other small complication, and her name just so happened to be Tobichi Origami. Don't tell anyone. In fact, I recommend that you forget everything that you saw and move on with your life. There wasn't really a whole lot he could say to that one, was there? Stoic as ever, I see. With that, Origami turned on her heels and started to make her way to class. I need to know why. Origami, the sudden halting of her progress told him that she was listening, at least in part. That girl, why did you seem so angry at her? Origami turned around and took a few steps closer to Shido. Because, that girl is a spirit. And a spirit took my parents away from me. Shido's eyes widened by a decent margin at her statement. What? But that girl was definitely. Ah, Shido, that's where you went. I was wondering where it was you wandered off to. Shido was still too shocked by Origami's earlier revelation, so it took him a few seconds to process someone calling his name. Shido glanced over his shoulder to see Naruto walking towards him at a rather brisk pace. Uzumaki-senpai? Is there a problem with something? Nah, not really. The boss lady just told me to start keeping an eye on ya a little more when we're in school. But what about? Shido turned back to where Origami had been standing just moments before, only to discover that she was no longer standing there in the first place. Where did she go? The least she could have done was end the conversation. I wouldn't worry about it so much, Shido. She probably only left because I'm here. What does that have to do with anything? Since Shido was new to the fold, he was operating on a need-to-know basis. Or as Katori put it, don't tell him anything or I'll hit you so hard you'll be the one who needs to be informed. If it was anyone else, Naruto might have just told him anyway, but A, Katori scared the crap out of him, and B, messing with people is way more fun than telling them the truth. So all Naruto could do was crack a massive grin and awkwardly scratch at the back of his head. You ready to go to work, Kurama? Always. It's about damn time too. It's been getting way too boring around here as far as I'm concerned. Whenever there was a spacequake, several things usually happened. First, the alarm would sound and everyone would be sent to the shelters for protection. Second, the spacequake would actually occur. Third, the spirit would emerge from the quake ready to do whatever it was they were there for. And last but certainly not least, the Ast would usually arrive and try to destroy the spirit. It was usually during this time frame ranging anywhere from a few minutes to a few hours, that Naruto was called into action. What was the occasion this time? A spacequake just so happened to occur right on top of the very place where he was forced to spend several hours of his precious day doing a horrid thing called learning. Are you in position? As his earpiece flared to life, so did his excitement levels. Always. Good, you know what you need to do. Just make sure that you buy as much time for Shido as possible. I'll do my best. Naruto had positioned himself on a small outbuilding a few dozen meters away from school. Just close enough that he could get an accurate count of the number of Ast wizards on the premises. TCH, 20 overall. Are you freaking kidding me? I knew I should have stocked up one rubber cement and dental floss. I think I get what the rubber cement would be for, but what the hell would want floss for? That's easy. I was going to dip the floss in gasoline and then wrap it around there. Stop, I don't want to know anymore. I swear you take after that pervert that you called a master way too much. I was just kidding, at least about the gasoline part anyways. Tome, that's your name. The small yet highly deadly wave of energy that impacted less than a meter away from him told Shido that the name given to him, the genius staff, back at the shop, were anything but. I'm terribly sorry to anyone with the name Tome, but that really isn't a name for people this day and age. I don't know why, but for some reason it felt like I was being mocked. The rather pointed look that the girl was sending him told him that she was being serious. Ha 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 ha, seems like that brat has his work cut out for him. No kidding. Naruto, and by extension Kurama, were listening in on Shido's attempt to converse with the spirit. Needless to say, it could have been going better than it was. Holy shit, that was close. Naruto was forced to bend his body at an awkward and as a barrage of gunfire came inches away from carving him to pieces. Focus, brat. I'm not going to die here and now just because you got a little distracted. Would you like to try? Another barrage was sent his way, this time containing both regular gun and missile fire. Naruto backflipped off of one of the side buildings and landed on top of a storage shed and managed to avoid them yet again. These ladies seem to be getting frustrated with me, not really all that surprising considering what I put some of them through. If someone were to look closely at Ast members, they would notice that some of them had rather odd alterations made to their standard uniforms. Some of them had massive signs duct taped to their backs that said, "Daddy issues." While others were sporting odd-looking wigs that bore a strong resemblance to a clown's hair. There were even a few that looked completely normal, aside from being a completely different color than what they normally would have been. There were a select few that didn't have any alterations to them whatsoever. These were the ones that had at least some experience in dealing with Naruto's antics. In the beginning, when Naruto had just started working with the crew of the Fraxinus, all any of them did was try and apprehend him. As they would quickly find out, however, they didn't quite have what it took to catch him. In fact, he had intentionally allowed himself to caught by them a few times just so he could prank them from a closer range. He would always escape quickly enough, so he saw no harm in it. More recently though, it had been getting slightly more difficult to evade them. On top of sending more personnel each time there was an incident, they had also started using actual ammunition on him. While it certainly stayed a game of cat and mouse, their respective roles had certainly switched on that day. I would love to actually, but there's sort of the problem called, I'm a giant fucking fox encased in stone and sealed inside your dumb ass. Oh, because you're just the easiest person to get along with. I know I'm a hell of a lot better than your whiny little virgin ass. Shut up. How about you make me? Sure I will. What are you going to do about it? Glare at me? Why you little? Wait a second. What? It took Kurama a couple of seconds to realize what Naruto had meant. Oh shit. The Ast had stopped firing at them. Actually, the Ast weren't anywhere to be found. If Naruto and Kurama were standing next to each other, they might have been able to see the expressions on their respective faces slowly morph, from worried to downright terrified. Oh shit, where did they go? The massive explosion that was followed by the spirit exiting the school with several Ast members in tow gave them a fairly decent idea of where they went. Kurama, are we in trouble? No, you however are in deep shit. What did I do to deserve this? What did I do to deserve this? Shido's day was going even worse than he thought it would. He had hoped that all he would have to do was ask the spirit on a date. Well, technically that was all he had to do, and that was all he had actually done. He hadn't really been counting on her not knowing what exactly a date was. So now all he could do was sit around the ship and wait for her to reappear. At least he had gotten to converse with her, albeit rather briefly. Toka. For some reason he felt a little proud when he said her name. He had given it to her after all. Congrats on that, by the way, you picked a good name for her. He had been so busy thinking that he hadn't noticed Naruto's presence at all. Do you do that for fun, or just because you can? I wonder. He put his hand under his chin as if he was pondering the answer. Both, really. If you could fly, wouldn't you want to whenever you could? Yeah, I guess so. Well, there's your answer. Shido didn't look the slightest bit satisfied with the answer he received. Hey, Uzumaki-senpai, I've told you like 12 times to just call me Naruto. Fine then, Naruto. Said Blonde looked very pleased with himself, having added another person to his list of people that say my name without all of that formal shit going on. So, are you gonna spit it out? Shido got distracted again. Something about Naruto just seemed to do that to people. Well, yeah, I've been wondering. What exactly do you do around here? Eh? And more importantly, why do you even work here in the first place? It seemed like Shido was on a roll with asking questions that Naruto couldn't answer. Well, technically he could answer them, he would also more than likely be punished for it later. Well, you see, I'm actually… Fuck, Kurama, I need options. How about you tell him that you're only here to check out women? God damn it, this is serious. Fine, fine. Aha, I've got it. Really? Hit me with it. Well, you see, Shido, I just so happen to be the cook of this fine vessel. The moment it left his mouth, Naruto swore never to ask Kurama for help in a pinch ever again. Fuck my life. Despite the realistic-looking smile on his face, he could feel a small part of his pride as both a shinobi and a man being smashed to pieces. The deep booming laugh that only he could hear didn't really make it any better. It was customary that after every encounter that Naruto had with either the ast or a spirit, that he would have to give a report. It wasn't the report itself that made him nervous, more so the one that he would be reporting to. He had been standing in front of the doors leading to the command bridge for a solid 5 minutes trying to think of what to say to her. Telling her that it was all the giant talking fox's fault probably wasn't the best idea, and his pride refused to allow him to say that he was bested. Even though, according to said giant talking fox, that both of those things had happened. It doesn't matter anyways, I guess. Better just face the music. Gek. The sound of the air leaving Naruto's lungs filled the room. Seconds after he had opened the door, he was met with a dropkick that was powered with the force of 1,000 angry little sisters. Our resident blonde was sent flying back into the hallway from whence he came. A few of the higher-ups in the room couldn't help but wince in sympathy for him. Despite their feeling bad for him, not a one of them spoke up in his defense. Lest they be next. Oh god, that wasn't very comfortable. Naruto was now back on his feet, and slowly making his way back through the door. That may not have been the best idea, however, as right as he walked back through the door his body was nailed full on by a chair that was sent rocketing towards him. However, this wasn't just any chair. This one just so happened to be Kotori's command chair. So once again Naruto was sent flying out into the hallway. This time he wisely chose not to go back and try to push his luck any further. Matter-of-factly, he chose that point to leave the ship and give his scary boss lady some time to cool off. He was going to give it a week just to be safe. That was still really painful. I thought that thing was bolted to floor. How did she even pick that thing up in the first place? Never underestimate an angry little sister. Now that was definitely an understatement. It has long since been proven that even a full-sized army can't muster enough power to stop a little sister when she gets angry. Shido. That was right, he supposed he let Shido down a bit as well. He hadn't bought near as much time as he was supposed to for him, and it made him feel more than a little guilty. Shido. Geez, I get it already, Kurama, stop making me feel like such a jerk. Kid, that wasn't me. Then who was it? He didn't usually talk to Kurama out loud given that his earpiece was usually in, but he had recently taken it out to avoid getting his ears screamed out. And he wasn't planning on putting it back in for a while. Shido. Looking below where he was perched on the school building, he saw something that nearly caused him to do a double take. Sure enough, the young man in question happened to be down there. It was the fact that he wasn't alone that caused Naruto's eyes to nearly bulge out of their sockets. Kurama, is she who I think she is? I think so. Do you know what this means? That you aren't in as much trouble as you thought you were? Naruto cracked a borderline insane grin and pulled out his phone and pushed the first number on his speed dial. Kurama, I believe you just hit the nail on the head. What is that? Shido's was once again brought out of his thoughts by his female companion's inquisitive nature. Toka was currently pressing her face against the glass of a bakery's display case. Shido, what is this? He didn't know what to expect when he has asked a spirit on a date, but this definitely wasn't it. When he had first encountered her, just based off of the way that she acted and carried herself, he figured that she wouldn't be very emotive. After his second interaction with her, however, he was able to see her smile for the first time. That moment helped him to realize that she might not have been quite as imposing as he thought. Good luck out there, Shido. Shido nodded towards the cashier as he was walking out of the bakery with his prize. Thanks Uzumaki-senpai, I'll try to do my best. Shido stepped outside to see his female counterpart practically in tears due to hunger. Here, take this. He would have face-faulted if the object that he was holding wasn't so important. The supposedly all-powerful spirit was drooling like a small child at what he had in his hand. That better not be poisoned. Judging by the expression she was wearing, she would have eaten it either way. It's not, now eat it all, Red. Shido placed the bread in her hand and ran back into the bakery. His eyes landed on the cashier, only to not recognize the person behind the register. The young woman, because the cashier was in fact female, simply tilted her head at Shido's actions. Do you need something else, sir? No, I'm good. Sorry for disturbing your time. As he left the store, he failed to notice the smirk that appeared on the girl's face. Damn, I just wanted to mess with him a little bit. But this is seriously awesome. When he first called Katori to let her know about the situation with Shido, she was still less than happy with him. In fact, she probably would have thrown another chair at him had he been in same room as her. That quickly changed as he told her about the events that were unfolding around her older brother. Apparently Katori had been drinking some juice at the time, as she immediately did a spirit take and proceeded to nail him with questions. After he had finished explaining the situation to her, the two of them quickly came up with a plan that would not only help Shido seal the spirit, but would be funny as hell if they managed to pull it off. Shido, do you think that we could find a date in a place like that? That place is. Originally he wasn't all that sure that this date would be successful. But after seeing that the only thing that Toka really cared about was food, he figured he would probably be just fine. What he had not taken into account was that despite his wallet growing considerably lighter, she didn't look to be slowing down anytime soon. I can pay for food carts and stalls all day, but a restaurant as expensive as this. Itsuka, I thought I recognized your miserable-looking face from over there. Just great. Turning to look to the all-too-familiar figure that was addressing him, Shido became less than pleased. Yo, Tanamachi. I'm so glad to see you. If Tanamachi picked up on the bland and sarcastic tone that Shido was practically shoving in his face, he obviously didn't care. Why? Because his attention was immediately drawn to the ridiculously pretty girl that his friend was accompanying. Whoa, hold on a second there, Shido. Aren't you going to introduce me to your friend here? When Shido didn't immediately reply, the gears in Tanamachi's head, small as they were, began to turn in a devious fashion. My Itsuka, could it be that you are on a date right now? Well, that's. The sound of the doors to restaurant opening and then closing, leaving the two of them alone, was enough for Tanamachi to understand the situation, as far as he was concerned anyway. I'll say no more. I understand what it's like to have a needy girl that needs to be taken care of. He pulled out his phone and showed Shido his girlfriend. My beloved has rather expensive tastes as well, so I understand your predicament. Please don't tell me you actually paid for any of that crap. As such, Tanomishi continued, being unable to hear Shido's thoughts. I feel that it is my duty to help you out in any way possible. He shoved an envelope into Shido's hands. Here, some random blonde bystander gave me this earlier, saying it would come in handy. I think it must be fate that has allowed this to happen. With that, Tanomishi walked away, leaving Shido to wonder what exactly had occurred. Blonde bystander? Naruto's face appeared in his mind for just a moment, before he quickly dispersed the mental image. Nah, there's no way it's him. It has to be a coincidence. As Shido walked inside the restaurant, Naruto jumped down from the rooftops directly where Shido had been standing just a few moments prior. Well, this seems to going well enough. It's boring, why doesn't he just force himself on her and get it over with? There are so many things wrong with what you just suggested. Like what? How about the entire thing? Forcing himself on her? Kissing someone who isn't willing is just plain wrong. You didn't seem to have a problem with it. That wasn't intentional. It still sure as hell wasn't consensual either. I tripped. I suppose you planned to blame groping her on your clumsiness as well? That part was. Hey. Naruto didn't have to be in his mindscape to picture the victorious smirk that his companion was wearing. TCH, whatever. I know what really happened back then, and that's all that matters. Yeah, but so do I. And in case you haven't forgotten, I can read your mind too. God. Fucking. Damn it. Deciding to drop the conversation, argument that he knew he had inadvertently just lost, he pulled out his phone to let Kotori know that Shido had entered the restaurant. After having a brief, yet moderately infuriating run-in with his little sister, Shido had done as she asked and taken Toka to the residential area just as asked. He didn't know whether to be surprised at finding a conveniently placed festival right where a bunch of houses used to be, or angry at the fact that he would more than likely be paying for more food. Congratulations, you two are our 100th customer's box the day, so all the food you get will be free. At that, Toka's eyes lit up and Shido breathed a silent sigh of relief that his wallet wouldn't be broken. Shido, let's go to this one first. See her point to a stand that was serving taiyaki. He was given no choice but to follow after her. The first thing that Naruto noticed about this date was that, aside from eating and walking together, they really weren't doing very much. It more so looked like Shido was just sort of an escort for a very hungry princess. Alright then Kurama, let's go shake this thing up a bit. That's more like a kid, what do you have in mind? As Naruto told Kurama of his plan, the two of them agreed that was a rather ingenious idea. And the aforementioned fox demon even went so far as to call Naruto not a complete idiot. Making sure to stay out of sight of the two, do they count as a couple? They're on a date after all. Nah, guys go do things with girls all the time. Just because they go on dates together doesn't mean that they have to be more than friends. What do you know about going on a date? For once Kurama was glad that part of his arm was free. Now he could facepalm whenever his container asked a stupid question. Just shut up and do what you were planning on doing in the first place. Right, sorry. Sneaking behind and around the food stalls while keeping out of Shido's line of sight was rather easy. Whether that was due to Naruto's shinobi training or the former being distracted could be put up for debate. Finally arriving at his destination, the blonde stepped inside the stall from the back and went about putting his brilliant plan into action. First he put on a chef's hat and apron and quickly went to work setting things up so that they would go just right. Now let's see here, where did I put that extra strength silly string? Ah, here it is. Right next to the gaffer tape and the pliers. Naruto, does this have something to do with little Miss Jealous over there? Yep, I've been able to sense her negative emotions since around the time that this little train wreck began. I'm guessing you plan to stop her from calling in the cavalry, so to speak. Yep, I've actually already set something up that will take care of her for the time being. But I want to make sure I've got enough surprises in store for any of her mecha exhibitionist friends that come along. Uzumaki-senpai, what are you doing back there? Apparently Naruto had failed to realize that Shido and his spirit companion, Date, had unintentionally snuck up on him. Thankfully years of paying a little bit of attention every once in a while in class back at the academy, and his perverted old teacher's lessons about lying saved the day. Oh you know, just taking stock. The brunette was sending him a rather flat look, but that did little to wipe that massive grin off of his face. Of what? Shit, he hadn't planned that far ahead yet. Damn you Shido, for being the only person in the history of 2D to ask the dreaded, follow-up question. Apparently only paying attention, some of the time, isn't a very effective learning strategy. What are you doing here? If by here, he meant behind the counter at one of the food stalls, then Naruto had absolutely no idea what was wrong. Inwardly though he was thankful that Shido hadn't pressed him more, he wasn't sure that he could take any more of Shido's twisted mind games. Am I not supposed to be here Shido? Everyone else you've ran into here has been a part of the Ratatoskr organization. Why would I be any different? Well, I guess that makes sense, kind of. Naruto's plan was going exactly, you guessed it folks, as planned. Shido felt Toka pull on his sleeve, in an attempt to gain his attention. Are you not having fun? Wah? He didn't know what he was expecting, but it certainly wasn't that. I've been having a lot of fun going around and eating all of this food with you. But Shido hasn't looked happy the entire time. So that made me start to wonder if maybe I'd done something wrong. Shido instantly felt terrible. It wasn't Toka's fault that he was feeling a little used right now. Well, actually it technically is, but I can't fault her for something like that. Sorry about that, Toka. I promise I'm not mad at you or anything like that. She looked a little relieved, but still appeared a bit nervous. You're having fun? Absolutely. Shido replied back immediately. You're sure? 100%. Are you really sure? I really am. Are you sure you're sure? I'm completely positive. Apparently he gotten his point across, as Toka gave him a smile that could light up a bottomless pit at the bottom of the ocean. She then proceeded to grab Shido's hand, which managed to invoke quite the blush on the already embarrassed teen, and dragged him away to go eat more food. Are you crying? Shut up, I just got something on my eye, that's all. And I'm the Rokubi. It's not my fault that they look adorable with each other. Do you seriously hear yourself? That's it, no more of those shoujo manga. Naruto on his part looked absolutely horrified and 4 hours earlier, they're eating. A noticeable twitch formed on the blonde's eye. Very observant kid, did you also happen to notice that they were walking around too? Was that sarcasm? Shut it. I know what they're doing, I'm just wondering why they haven't done anything else yet. He spent all that time get ready, and has some of the top people on dating in the entire country at his. Actually I'm pretty sure all of those people are the exact opposite of helpful, but that's beside the point. So please try to explain to me why the most interesting thing that those two have done is eat 12 orders of takoyaki. Not that watching other people eat wasn't something that he yearned to spend the rest of his life doing and all, but this was really boring. And what else would they be doing exactly? I'm sure you must have some idea with your vast experience in that particular field. Was that sarcasm? You know, date stuff. Stuff like, well, y'all, no, stuff. Now that he thought about it, he'd never actually been on a date in his entire life. He supposed that he had asked Sakura on a date once or twice. PFFFFFFTTTTTTTCCCCHHHHHHH. Shut it you. But he'd never gotten her to agree to go on one. Looking back on it, he didn't really understand where that attraction even came from. She was loud, annoying, wouldn't take no for an answer when it came to her crush and… Oh my god. That awkward moment when you realize the only reason you had a crush on someone was because they were just like you. Don't forget that she was obsessed with a non-primary color. Now that I think about, people used to dislike her a lot too. Not as much as you, but you know. Guess that's what they mean when they say that hindsight is 20/20, huh? Brat, now that I think about it, wasn't Sasuke obsessed with black for a little while? Hey, kid, nah, that's not quite right. He wore blue for a little while too, now that I think about it. What the hell do you think you're doing, you ass fart? Being jostled from your thoughts is never a good thing. It's even worse when it's by an angry person. What you talking about there, boss lady? Everything is perfectly fine here. He didn't exactly know what it was that she thought he'd done wrong, but he was almost positive it wasn't his fault. Oh really? I suppose that means you can still see Oni-chan and the princess down there then? The sweetness of her tone unsettled him. Oh well, it didn't matter anyways. He was being extra vigilant today, so there was no way that shit, where were they? That girl had 9 orders of soba, that should have taken at least 20 minutes to finish, and hasn't even been half that yet. What is that girl? It seems that her being a spirit isn't just for show. That was terrifying. No being, human or not, could eat like that. Truly a terrifying force of nature. He could feel Kurama nod his head along with him in agreement. Sue, I'll just take that long pause of horrified silence as a yes. And since you obviously have this under control, I think we should all just take a break for a while, right everyone? That was an empty threat and Katori knew it. There was no way that Rain or any of the others up there would ever abandon him like that. Over the past few months they had formed an inseparable bond that would never be broken by a little girl's feeble attempts to. Sounds good to me. I'm all for it. Yep, works for me. A chorus of several other voices joined to add their consent. Traitors. Traitors one and all. Hey guys, come on now. Let's be reasonable here. The resounding click of his earpiece signified that he was alone. A bunch of traitors, the whole lot of them. There was no way he was ever going Manoa-san keep tabs on her exes ever again. Now the only one he could rely on was himself. Wait, that wasn't true. He still had his partner of mind and spirit to rely upon. Despite their differences in the past, the two had an unshakable bond that crossed the very bounds of space and time itself. Well kid, not that this isn't fun and all, but I think I'll be taking a nap now. Have fun. With that, their mental connection abruptly cut off, leaving him more alone than he'd been in days. Oh, I get it. You guys don't think I can pull this off, do you? Well, I'll show you all. Screw those guys, he had this in the bag. Now all he had to do was find those two. In a massive crowd of people, without any help whatsoever. To make things even better, it had chosen that exact moment to start raining. Challenge accepted. As it would turn out, finding them was in fact rather easy. Even if he could only make a handful of clones without tiring himself out, it still sped up his search process by a considerable margin. So when he gained the memories of them walking into his second favorite place ever, the first was anywhere with ramen, he quickly flashed to their location. He didn't really like using the Hiraishin, partly due to how hard it was for him to place markers, although he knew that would get easier with practice, and partly because of the toll that it took on his body. While it didn't require a lot of chakra all at once, things tended to add up over time. With each use of his father's technique, he could literally feel a chunk, albeit a small one, of his chakra instantly disappear. It was nowhere near as bad as the Rasengan as far as chakra consumption went, but it wasn't exactly a cakewalk either. Apparently, who would have thought, the Hiraishin takes a lot of practice to use in combat. And even then he still didn't think he would be able to ever use it on the same level as his father and the second Hokage. He could still do it, he just needed a lot more concentration compared to his father. This meant that it wasn't really all that usable in combat yet being the definitive word. He'd had some success with it recently, he'd managed to save Shido with it actually. Back when he'd first met the princess, he'd used it to get Shido away from her and his personal stalker. That was actually the first time that he'd done 2 consecutive jumps in a row before. But he wasn't about to tell Kotori that. Ooh, what is this place? Did we just infiltrate the Mecha team's secret base? No, it's just an arcade. He couldn't stop himself from smiling at the way the girl reacted to her new surroundings. Her reactions were very similar to the way his were back in the beginning. He remembered how amazed he was at everything these people did with electricity. Back home all they had were light bulbs and other basic electrical implements, and most of those were considered to be top of the line. It was funny, even if the people here were incredibly weak, not that he could talk much in his current state, they still managed to use amazing things. And yet here they had moved past that level of technology over 100 years ago. That wasn't even mentioning their other forms of technology. He recalled back to when he had first been told that he was in some type ship. He had thought it odd at first that he couldn't feel the rocking back and forth of the vessel, but just assumed that they were docked in some way. So imagine his surprise when he found out that he was inside of a top-of-the-line stealth attack craft floating thousands of meters above the ground. Long story short, it took 2 weeks to fully repair the bridge. And even to this day he made sure to spend the least amount of time that he had on that thing. Watching these guys, it might be boring. But still, seeing the way that the two were working together while trying to win a stuffed, what was that a thing? It kinda reminded him of a chicken nugget, but figured that it probably supposed to be something else. I guess it could be worse. Yeah, you could be the poor bastard who has stand on the side and watch other people have fun. Naruto felt his eye give an involuntary twitch. Don't you have a nap to take or something? That was apparently enough to shut up his passenger, at least for the time being anyway. With that resolved, the blonde moved a few aisles down from the couple, and proceeded to kill some time. And by killing time he meant playing Mortal Kombat. As far as he was concerned, both of those things involved killing something, so didn't see the problem. Finish him? Ah shit, that was my last 100 yen coin. Would it be frowned upon to borrow money from Shido? Yes, probably. He guessed that the guy had been through enough without him taking his pocket change. The guy hadn't even known that any of this was going on until a little while ago, and yet here he was working his hardest. By taking a ridiculously cute girl on a date. That was paid for by someone else. With no adult supervision. Well actually, technically there were adults supervising, but given their backgrounds, and taking into account the little stunt they pulled earlier with the Dream Park, they would probably encourage any incorrect behavior before trying to stop it. Still though, all things considered, there were definitely worse things that a hormonal teenage boy could be doing with his time. Like watching another boy take a cute girl on a date. Actually, now that I think about this is kinda creepy, isn't it? I'm pretty sure I could be labeled as a stalker for this sort of thing. I know she asked me to watch over them and all, but do I really need to observe everything that they do? 3 hours prior. Just remember, keep an eye on them both no matter what, alright? What if things get violent? I'm not sure I can protect both of them and fight off the Mecha Exhibitionist Brigade at the same time. Kotori shook her head at Naruto's description of the AST. It was easy to see that they weren't really his favorite choice of company. Not that she thought all that differently, to be honest. I don't care what you have to do, or even how you go about doing it. Just keep him safe. Understand? Well, if you're sure, do I get paid overtime for this? No. Pay raise? Not even a little bit. Ramen? She gave him a contemplative look before shrugging her shoulders, showing him that she had relented. Fine. Hell yeah, TT Ibeo. While so far that was proving to easy enough, he doubted that it would last for long. He was very confident in his ability to set traps, prank-related obstacles, but that wouldn't be enough to stop an entire squad of determined and angry young women. He learned the hard way when he was young that women were truly a force to be feared, and his time with Ero Sennin had only solidified that fact. You could only watch one of the most powerful people you had ever met get beat up so many times before you were scarred in some way. Being around a bunch of other scary women like Tsunade Bachan didn't help with that either. Hot take that. It looks like it's my win this time around. Interjection: Yuzuru would like to point out that she has defeated Kaguya in the previous 3 matches. Oh, shut it you. That just means that I need to win the next 3 in a row. It can't be all that hard if you can pull it off. Naruto couldn't help take notice of a rather heated game of Super Street Fighter 2 that was being played off to his right. Or to be more precise, the 2 girls who were playing the game. At first he thought someone else had learned the Kage Bunshin, because the 2 girls were practically identical to one another. He quickly dismissed that possibility on further observation, however, as he noticed some subtle differences between the 2 girls. That quickly led him to the conclusion that the 2 were related in some way, sisters more than likely. The girl on the left had bright orange hair. That's awesome. That cascades down her front into 2 separate curls that go down to just past her shoulders. A long, braided ponytail also runs clear down to her mid-back, which he could see very clearly due to the clothing that she was wearing. Actually, saying that she was wearing clothes might have been a little generous. Her garments were made of a series of dark blue straps that wrapped around her body just enough to cover her modesty. The girl to her right was dressed similarly, although her clothes had a purplish tint to them. Her body, not that he was staring, was also a little less developed than her counterparts. Which was really saying something. Okay, he was totally staring. I can't put my finger on it, but something is definitely different about those 2. It fell. It seemed that the new happy couple had gotten their chicken nugget. Good for them. He'd seen several relationships started on TV because of food before. Who'd have thought that Anpan would lead to so much? He returned his attention back to the girls he totally wasn't creeping on, only to notice that they were gone. Odd, he hadn't even heard them leave. He'd reacted without thinking. Had he been a second later, then Shido, or even the spirit, would have died. So now, all because of his stupid hero complex, he was the one laying on the ground with a massive pool of blood leaking out of his gut. Oi Yuto, ko on W. You need to Skyus. If pa out o u wo be ble to con. He was aware of Kurama's voice was fading in and out, but he was unable to process anything. He didn't know if it had been a few seconds or a few hours. He was almost glad when he felt his body start to go numb. Alas, he knew it wouldn't be that easy. Even if it was heavily repressed, he could still feel the corrosive energy building up inside of him. His body felt like it was on fire, and then he saw red. 2 hours earlier. Gah, that stupid machine was rigged. Explanation. Perhaps Kaguya is just terrible at video games. Can it Yuzuru? What do you know anyway? As the now identified Yuzuru opened her mouth to retort, she was silenced by a hand from counterpart. Never mind, I don't need the opinion of someone beneath me. The more stoic of the 2 raised an eyebrow at her sister's retort. Reminder. Yuzuru would like add that she is now ahead of Kaguya in the rankings. A smirk made its way to her face, just as a mortified look made its way onto Kaguya's. If Yuzuru remembers correctly, then I am currently ahead of you at 93 wins and 92 losses. Well, that's because These sorts of challenges are below my standards. We haven't been doing anything serious enough to warrant my best effort." That was a lie and they both knew it, but Yuzuru would humor her sister, even if only a little. Question: what would Kaguya consider to a challenge worthy of her time? As far as Yuzuru is aware, neither Kaguya nor myself have missed any categories in our competitions. She couldn't think of anything. Heck, they'd even made a competition about who could come up with a better test. She'd lost that one actually, but that was beside the point. Kaguya, for her part, wasn't faring much better. There had to be something that they could fight over. The two sisters slumped down, almost lazily, onto the back of an advertising sign overlooking the arcade. While Yuzuru decided to bide her time by taking a nap, Kaguya took to looking around at the people going about their daily lives below them. It wouldn't be the first time that she had found inspiration that way. The rain had cleared up a few minutes prior, and a mass of people had flooded the streets again. Not that it made anything more exciting. This place was starting to get boring for her, and she had no doubt that Yuzuru felt the same way. Soon they would go and find somewhere else to continue their seemingly never-ending spree on competitiveness. Just as she was about to suggest that they go somewhere else, something caught her eye. "Excuse me." "Yes sir, I apologize. My bad. Move it or lose it lady." "Hey, watch the goods pal." From her perspective it looked like a large box with various oversized knickknacks was walking through a crowd of people, and bumping into everything in its path. She was just able to make out a mop of something blonde and spiky poking over the top before it turned around a corner and out of her sight. Usually she wouldn't have cared in the slightest about something so insignificant. But the level of boredom she was facing was on par with watching a grade school Christmas concert, and she hadn't even been to one of those. "Nay, Yuzuru. I'll be right ba." Instead of the usual unemotive state that her sister's face seemed to be permanently stuck in, she was greeted to another sight. A soft smile rested on her sleeping face, a sight that Kaguya so very rarely got to see. A smile made its way onto her face as well, albeit a much sadder one. Despite everything that she might do or say, she really did care about her sister, even if she could never show it. Even now, the only times she ever saw her sister smile was when she was asleep. Quietly, so as not to wake her, Kaguya hopped down from their rest spot and quickly chased after the box with hair. Hopefully she would be back before Yuzuru woke up. Despite being delayed by her sister's small display of kawaii, she still was able to catch most of the way up with the box. Only to see it turn into a small side alley and completely disappear from view. She rushed after it, so as not to risk almost losing it again. Luckily for her the box, and its carrier, had stopped about halfway through the alley. She couldn't get a very good look at the person, now easily identifiable as a male, due to him having his back turned. He had set the box down and was rummaging through it, all the while mumbling to himself like a madman. If she had been anyone else she might have been worried about approaching a guy like that, but she wasn't a spirit for nothing. She confident that she could handle anything the world threw at her. "Anno, excuse me." That seemed to get his attention, as he stopped digging through the box and turned his head slightly as if finally registering her presence. She moved to take a step forward. "Don't move from where you are." The blonde guy still hadn't turned around all of the way, but the tone he used kind of pissed her off. "Oh really, why shouldn't I? Are you going to stop me?" Let it be known that she was not one to be ordered around. Might have had something to do with her not having anyone charge of her. "You don't understand, you really shouldn't move from that spot. I don't know where you were planning on going, but you should change it to back the way ya came before something bad happens." Kaguya felt her eyebrow twitch. Who the hell did this guy think he was ordering her around like that? So, while looking the guy directly in the only eye she could see, she moved her left leg forward one step, and waited. "Well, I moved. What are going to do a boo?" She suddenly felt a pair of strong arms close around her pull her out of the way of something. What was that something? One of the greatest enemies of people with weak stomachs, ranch dressing. Not just a little bit either, there had to have been at least 3 gallons of it pooled up where she had just been standing. Immediately after that it got even worse. She watched in morbid fascination as the area was doused with all sorts of things ranging from dried bacon bits to croutons. This was topped off by several full heads of lettuce landing on top of it all. Okay, maybe she shouldn't have moved after all. It seemed that the salad of death wasn't quite done however, as a massive bowl easily big enough to fit a person inside of it, landed upside down on top of it all. Definitely should have stayed put. Have you ever pictured how it was that you'd meet your end? Have you ever even given a thought to what your last moments would be? Will they be spent passing on in your sleep at an old age while being awkwardly surrounded by a group of your closest family and friends? Or will you go out in a really terrifying way like wrestling a rhinoceros while wearing nothing on your body except for some oven mitts? I've had that dream before, and I must say it was rather terrifying. Whatever it is that might have come to mind, death by salad was not something that Kaguya had ever taken into consideration. After all, who even comes up with something like that? What the hell is wrong with you? I told you not move, why'd you do it anyway? It was then that Kaguya became aware of the person who'd saved her from becoming an oversized crouton. It was definitely the same guy that had been rummaging around in the box a moment ago. Now however, she was able to get a better look at him, and if she was going to be perfectly honest, he was a lot better looking than she first thought he'd be. Combine that with their close proximity and him having his arms still wrapped around her and well, she might have been a little embarrassed. Naruto on the other hand was more than a little annoyed. It took a lot of prep work to set up the salad bar of doom as he'd come to call it, and all of it went to waste. All because of some bratty teenage girl with an attitude. Speaking of that, Naruto became increasingly aware of the distance between the two, or the lack thereof. He immediately relinquished his hold on the girl, Spirit, and took a step back, while being mindful of not getting ranch all over his shoes. It was the smell that made it so effective, and he had no desire to have to deal with that today. The lack of a certain blonde in her immediate personal space gave her the few seconds she needed to get her mind right and to process everything that had just happened. Why was I almost killed by a poorly made bowl of human-sized salad? Ah, good question. Naruto scratched the back of his head nervously. Well, yeah, see. Wait a minute, did she just say poorly made? Now hold on there, what do you mean by poorly made? I spent a long time putting that together, Datbayo. No one spoke bad about his death traps. Even the third Hokage, one of the most legendary shinobi to ever exist. The man who'd not only survived, but led his village to victory through multiple great wars, had a healthy respect for the havoc that Naruto could unleash. So who the hell did she think she was trying to tell him that his trap was badly designed? Huh? Was this guy a moron? He even used that demanding tone with her again too. You heard what I said. Poorly made. She crossed her arms under her chest absent-mindedly. Seriously, that was hardly even a salad. You can't just get some lettuce, smother it with dressing and call it salad. There were croutons too, damn it. Was this girl a moron or something? How did she not notice the croutons? There were 10 pounds of them. Ho? I'm sorry I didn't notice. I was too busy being appalled by that overuse of ranch dressing. A twitch had developed over Naruto's left eye. That's the point. It's a trap. And not the kind that I nearly scarred myself for life after mistakenly reading about either. What kind of moron uses a salad as a trap anyway? Are you stupid? Do you want people to know how stupid you are, is that it? Naruto was about to retort, before he realized something. Hey, a smug look came across his whiskered features as he crossed his arms. What? You totally just called it a salad. Origami, come in. Do you read me? I read. The young AST member's voice sounded slightly nasally, probably due to the fact that she'd been hanging upside down for the last 10 minutes. Immediately after having escaped from the previous trap, she was then promptly drugged through a pool of some sort of resin and flung at the wall on the opposite side of the alley so that she resembled a bug stuck on a windshield. He was dead. She didn't care if she had orders from the top not to engage him at school. The next time she saw him she was going to murder him. You haven't moved from your position in a while, are you okay? I'm fine. I have the targets right where I want them. Origami tested the material that was binding her to the wall, roughly satisfied that it had hardened enough to become brittle. Once she was satisfied that the rubber compound wouldn't stretch any longer, she tensed the muscles in her body and used all of her strength to break free from her cement-based prison. Only for nothing to happen. Ah, it seemed he'd taken her above-average strength into account. They just don't know it yet. The person in the other end on the line sweat dropped in the unsuccessful breakout attempt. Do you need us to send someone to help you get out? Onegai shimasu. Dead, and she didn't care how it happened either. Man, Naruto rubbed gingerly at a spot on his left shoulder. The clothing there was slightly blackened as well. Way to remind me how much I hate lightning. From what little I observed, it seemed like you were quite deserving. Naruto glared at Well, he couldn't actually glare directly at Kurama due to him being outside of his inner world at the moment, but he knew that he could tell when he did it all the same. Not helping. I wasn't trying to. Why couldn't he ever meet any normal girls, like ever? Either they had the power to blow up entire cities, tried to turn the entire population of your planet into mindless drones, or flew around using. Actually, he had no idea how exactly the combat suits that the Ast used even worked in the first place. It was probably explained to him at some point and he just wasn't listening. Not that it really mattered, they could be using pixie dust for all he cared. Speaking of which, how have none of those meatbags been aware that there was a spirit just randomly walking around the city? Shouldn't they have been able to detect the materialization? Not necessarily. Naruto absently watched as the date seemed to be nearing its end. Both Shido and the princess had reached the massive viewing deck that overlooked a good portion of the downtown area. The setting sun had started to cast a faint orange glow in the mid-evening sky, and it was clear that things had been going well for two of them if the smiles were any indication. Don't forget, she didn't cause a quake when she manifested this time either, and none of our sensors picked up a thing despite her being right here in front of us. He still had a hard time believing that so much power could be stored inside such a small girl like that, but it wasn't like he hadn't seen her use it before. Moreover, it wasn't so long ago that he'd been in a death match to decide the fate of his world against a supposed goddess, of all things. I'm surprised you haven't raised the alarm about it yet. Don't you think you should make sure that our employers have a heads up about something like that? If Katori discovered that Naruto found a spirit just wandering town without letting her know about it. Yeah, it was one of those rare times where Kurama was immeasurably glad that he was mostly locked off from Naruto's senses via the new additions to his imprisonment. I probably should. Naruto scrunched up his face in consideration. But I'll do it after this is taken care of. The last thing we need is to be starting another problem when this one isn't even fully taken care of yet. That was one of the most intellectually sound things to ever come out of your mouth. I'm actually impressed. Screw you too. Naruto switched his earpiece back on to get a better understanding of how things were going. Anything exciting on your end there, boss lady? The channel remained silent for a few seconds, before Naruto eventually heard a tired-sounding sigh over the line. Things are looking good, despite the fact that Shido has next to no experience with women. He's doing a rather impressive job. The blonde raised an eyebrow at the somewhat depressed tone that the twin-tailed girl was using. Things were going well, like seriously well for them. Despite their massive budget, state-of-the-art technology, and the impressive tactical minds that they had at their disposal, they weren't really all that successful at what they did. They hadn't even actually saved a single spirit yet. None of them counted the rabbit goddess because all they had to do there was show up and retrieve her from the wreckage. Not only that, but they had to rely on outside help, from a high school boy at that, to actually get results. Even if they all took orders from a 13-year-old schoolgirl, that was still a sore spot for a few. Yes, both he and the rest of the command chain were aware that they were all very dysfunctional, but that didn't mean that they didn't have their pride, damn it. Except for Kawago, that man was just sad. You doing okay up there, boss lady? You sound irritated. The redhead released another sigh as she firmly massaged her temples. She could feel another headache coming on. Why that was she wasn't quite sure, however. Her eyes drifted to the semi-frantic but still organized chaos that was currently taking place in the command bridge, between the so-called love experts, arguing amongst themselves about what to have Shido do next, the research personnel scrambling around trying to gather as much scientific data as possible, and a certain loud blonde grating at her nerves over the comms. It was enough for her to want to scream and pull her hair out. Okay, the headache was probably a little justified. All of that wasn't even the worst part. Oh no, the worst part was what was happening on the ground. All of her planning, scheming, and careful training was paying off perfectly. And that was the problem. Her eyes narrowed as Shido and the princess stood side by side watching the sunset together. Do they have to stand so close? Her grip on the armrest of her chair tightened to dangerous levels. A part of her, a rather large part of her at that, wanted to be the one standing next to him in her stead. But she knew that for the time being she would have to grit her teeth and bear with watching her beloved Oni-chan hold hands with another girl. Nay, Katori? Oi, boss lady. All she had to do was ignore him and he'd go away. Are you ignoring me? Yes, it appeared she was. Although, if the twitch that was developing under her right eye was any indication, then it wasn't going very well. Are you mad or something? Her grip on the chair had caused her knuckles to turn white, and her irritation levels were becoming more and more apparent to everyone else in the room if the gradual quiet that began to settle in was any indication. So much so that even Rain took a small step away from the little red head. "Oh, I think I know what this is about, Tilda. Oh, he'd better not go there. You aren't jealous that he's paying attention to another girl or anything, are you?" She could hear a few suppressed chuckles come from around the room, and could easily picture the annoying grin that he was probably wearing on his stupid whiskered face. "Look, if it makes you feel any better, I'm sure if you asked he'd take you out on a date anytime." She squeezed down even harder, breaking her armrest into pieces. Alright, that's it. She'd had enough, it was driving her insane. "Now listen here you." She was cut off by flashing of warning lights on the scanning systems, as well as the massive column of dark red energy that enveloped the entire observation deck. That was definitely not good. Moments earlier, "I have the target in my sights, I can fire anytime you need." Tobichi Origami was having a very bad day. She'd been tied up, covered in God knows how many different substances of varying stickiness, encased in rubber cement, and even set on fire. Twice. All of that would be more than enough to absolutely infuriate just about anyone on the planet, but it didn't stop there. For the icing on her proverbial cake of misery, she had to stand by and watch the future father of her children. It was going to happen, he just didn't know it yet, make goo-goo eyes at a monster in human skin. "Don't make a move just yet, continue your observations. The superiors want to see where this leads." It would be leading to a bullet between the eyes of a certain something if she had anything to say about it. She would have an itchy trigger finger in this situation even without having to deal with hours of harassment from target number 2. So it was safe to say that she would pull the trigger on a moment's notice. "Huh? We can fire? Alright. Did you hear that, Origami? Take your shot. Wind speed, nominal. Distance, adjusted for. Target." Her eyes narrowed even further in disgust at the sight of humanity's greatest enemy trying to play at being one of them. Dead. This is for mother and father. And with that, she pulled the trigger. "Toka, look out." Shido charged forward and pushed the spirit girl away from her current spot as his instincts screamed at him to move. "What are you doing?" Toka landed unceremoniously on her backside as Shido prepared for nothing. Shido blinked a few times in confusion as an incredulous look appeared on his face. "Well, what was that for, you big jerk?" Toka was glaring up at him from her position on the ground. "Well, the brunette stood there for a moment at a loss for words. "Huh, why did I do that exactly?" That's all for now. If you enjoy, then please like, share and do comments.